Hey everyone, I'm Cappy and welcome to Beyond the Plate. This is a podcast where we sit down with the world's culinary elite to explore their journey into the food industry and the social impact they have made in their communities. If you're new to the pod, welcome. If you've listened before, we're glad you're back. Today's episode, we sit down with the OG Food Network star himself, Chef Tyler Florence, and he's all business, literally. He's been shaking stuff up in the food world for well over 30 years, and he's clearly not stopping. Let's go Beyond the Plate. Actually, before we go beyond the plate, we want to give a shout out to our friends at Martin's Famous Potato Rolls. Martin's is an all-American family-owned and operated company founded in 1955 and headquartered in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. They're the number one potato roll in America, and as I like to always say, they can make almost any burger taste better. Actually just had a great burger on a Big Marty roll at Bar Sparrow in Washington, D.C. Oof, it was delicious. Anyway, Martin's mission encompasses more than just baking the best bread and providing good American jobs. They also believe in giving back to their community and the world around them, which is a huge reason of why we love them. Through volunteering time and donating resources, they support hundreds of charitable organizations, such as food banks, after-school programs, disaster relief, and others that provide sustenance and comfort to people in need both close to their baking facilities and abroad. So, to learn more about Martin's and check out some great recipes, go to potatorolls.com and follow them on social media at Potato Rolls. Martins, we thank you. So for our audio test, we'd like to have our guests name a bunch of something. So for you, let's go with name 5 ingredients you're loving right now.
45-day dry-aged New York steaks, our 45-day dry-aged New York tomahawks. Our beef program is spectacular. Our oysters are spectacular at my restaurant, Miller Lux.
Sound good. Let's do it. Today's guest is a 27-year Food Network veteran. He's authored 17 cookbooks, including his newest, which we'll hear about in this episode, called American Grill. He's a 2-time James Beard Award nominee for Best Chef West Coast, has had a number of award-winning restaurants, including Wayfare Tavern and his highly acclaimed San Francisco restaurant, Miller Lux, located in the Chase Arena, home of the Golden State Warriors. Recently named Best Steakhouse in Bay Area of San Francisco Magazine. I also got to mention one of my personal favorites. I know Bayless gets a lot of love for O'Hare, but Tyler Florence Fresh in San Francisco Airport, man, that's one of my favorite stops.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
He has a production company and is also the co-host of a popular weekly iHeartRadio podcast with Wells Adams titled Two Dudes in a Kitchen. Please enjoy this episode as we go beyond the plate with Chef Tyler Florence. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yeah, 27 years, dude. Food 911, How to Boil Water, Tyler's Ultimate, Great Food Truck Race, so many others. What is the secret sauce, man? That's a long time.
I think it's authenticity, to be really honest with you, right? I really love what I do for a living. I really love creating recipe concepts so we can share. I really love teaching people how to cook. And I think we've been on television for a really long time because people trust our recipes and they're tested down to the grain of salt. They know they're going to have a good time with it. It's just part of our secret sauce.
I mentioned you're an incredible teacher, but it's funny you mentioned teaching because I remember, I think we first met like 20 years ago at South Beach Wine and Food. And I honestly, we've never talked about this, but I remember like it was yesterday, I was in the Lowe's kitchen prepping for your demo at the South Beach Wine and Food Festival. You were doing Tyler's Ultimate Paella, and I was prepping your dish, and you had just gotten back from like Valencia, and you came up to me, and you were like, just getting deep into the dish, the smells and what you experienced there. And I honestly, I've told that story 100 times, and those memories like stick with me hard.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You started to show interest in cooking at what, 15 years old? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I started working professionally in restaurants when I was 15. I started washing dishes in the nicest restaurant in my hometown of Greenville, South Carolina. And it was a fancy French restaurant called The Fish Market. That's where I tasted lobster and hollandaise for the first time. It's where I tasted filet mignon wrapped in bacon for the first time. It's where we tasted like the rich flavor of demi-glace for the first time and the shrimp dipped in remoulade for the first time. Those like big moments where you go, like, food is just really a spectacular sensory experience, and I've never really looked back from it.
What kind of kid were you growing up?
I grew up in the 80s in upstate South Carolina, and I was getting a different signal than most everybody else. I liked British New Wave. I rode skateboards. I used to ride for a team, which was cool. We used to ride half pipes. And I just had this kind of edgy outside vibe going on. And the restaurant world just spoke to that. You know, so if you ever go in the back of the kitchen, there's a bunch of like pirates in a way, like razor sharp knives, but everyone's got a different story. And I found my culture early, really fit into the restaurant world, and it's been really good to me.
And you were a latchkey kid, is that right?
Like most kids in the 80s, you had two working parents. And so you got home in the afternoon and then you had to figure out that stove and refrigerator relationship pretty quickly. And so you just had to learn how to cook for yourself.
So growing up in South Carolina, it's had a lot of influence on your cooking. Is there like a significant moment you can share?
Well, growing up in the South where food is distinctive from anywhere else in the world, like Southern American cooking is just like deeply defined. And so I grew up with Carolina barbecue, which is either whole hog or slow roasted shoulder, smoked and then served as like pulled pork with a mustard based barbecue sauce. And we generally make sandwiches out of it. That's my food culture. Fried chicken is one of my favorite things in the world because I grew up with that. Collard greens cooking down in a pot with a ham hock, low and slow all day. The smell of that, deviled eggs and really good creamy coleslaw and macaroni and cheese and smothered pork chops and black eyed peas and okra and all kinds of fun stuff like that. That's the flavor of my youth. Fresh coastal seafood, snapper and oysters and crab and all kinds of fun stuff. Every weekend was a big feast. And growing up with great, delicious Southern flavors is pretty much the rootstock of everything I do.
I love it. So when we started this podcast, I thought I was going to ask every guest about culinary school. Like I was, like their point of view. And I didn't. I stopped for no reason, quite frankly. But what stuck out to me in your bio, it mentions proud graduate of Johnson & Wales University. And I was like, okay, proud graduate. Did you enjoy that experience? And do you encourage young cooks to go to culinary school?
I do. I think in a way, it's a point of pride that nobody can ever take away from you. It's good to get it out of the way early, just like college. It's good to get it out of the way. And there's no shame in going back to school later in life. When I was in culinary school in my early 20s, I was in school with a bunch of people in their 30s, right? I really found food as a passion and wanted to go kind of solidify their position and then kind of re-enter the workforce with a piece of paper that said you had done something interesting in life, right? And you learned a lot and you learned a lot of theory about food. You learned like where things come from and where food migrated through trade winds and how one food became popular in another part of the world and how cilantro, for example, circled the world a couple of times. All these other stories are very interesting. And these are some of the things that gets talked about and discussed theory-wise in culinary school. And then also the thing that's really important about culinary school is meeting and networking with your classmates, because those classmates will be your generation of chefs that you're going to go to events with, right? That you're going to collaborate in cities with and be part of your social network, which is really, really important. Going to do something big in your late teens, early 20s, that will be the foundation of who you are in the future. I think higher education is really important. And culinary school is really important, but also business school is really important as well. So I have a culinary degree, and then I also have a business degree in hotel restaurant management. And I think that was probably the most important degree that I received. I have 3 degrees. I also have a doctorate in culinary arts. And so which is honorary, by the way, from Johnson & Wales University. I got that in 2005. I'd already had maybe 4 or 5 years of culinary training before I went to culinary school. And I also worked in restaurants while I was in culinary school. But my business degree, I think, has been the foundation of my success, because any good chef can create a nice scallop dish, but a chef who doesn't know what they're doing can bankrupt the restaurant in 6 months. So I think it's really important to kind of know the financial understandings of what makes a successful restaurant and study that specifically. Most big culinary schools like Johnson & Wales University and CIA offer a continuing education program past culinary. And then once you get into the business side of it, then I think you're locked and loaded to get into the industry, because there's a big, huge trust, right? When a restaurant group hires you as an executive chef, there's a general understanding that you know how the financial obligation of restaurants work, right? And what food cost looks like, what labor cost looks like, because you're going to be responsible for the biggest expense of how restaurants make money. Kind of having a good understanding of what that means, I think it's crucial to the success of a great chef.
I couldn't agree more. Did you do the business side after culinary, and did you do it at Johnson & Wales?
I did it. Yep. So I got a culinary degree, and then I stuck around for 2 more years and then got a business degree. And both of those were at Johnson & Wales in Charleston, South Carolina.
So when you were there, did you ever think you'd be here today, or what was the plan?
Like where I am today and how media exists today didn't exist when I was going to culinary school. There was no Top Chef. There was no Chopped. There was no Food Network. There was PBS. There was like the Great Chef series on Discovery Channel, but there wasn't this big mass media thing. When I was going to culinary school, the generation above me, which is Wolfgang Puck and Emeril Lagasse and Tom Colicchio and Mario Batali and Ming Tsai, and all those guys are about 10 years older than me. And so all those guys were coming out with cookbooks, and all those guys were sort of leading the way and developing what is regional cuisine in America right now. You were really kind of paying attention to Alice Waters and Bradley Ogden and Northern California, because they were defining what San Francisco food was all about, and he really paid attention to Wolfgang Puck because he was Mr. LA with Spago, and what Emeril Lagasse was doing in New Orleans because he was Mr. New Orleans, and on and on and on. It's like Dean Ferry in Dallas, and I can go on and on. But chefs like regionally around America back in that time frame were developing their own unique palate by looking in their own backyard, talking about what made like regional American cuisine distinct and interesting. And I thought it was fascinating.
Did you go from South Carolina to New York?
Yep, I sure did. So I graduated in June of 1994, and then I moved to New York City right after that. And I was in New York City for 15 years. And that's when I started on Food Network. I started with Food Network in 1996. So this is my 28th year on the network.
Did you work the restaurant in Chelsea cafeteria?
I started cafeteria. I launched cafeteria.
That's what I thought. For some reason, whenever I walk by there, you pop into my head.
We launched cafeteria in 1997, and we got named Best New Restaurant and lost that year to Babo. Babo opened the same year. And then we were nominated for Best New Design, and we lost that one to John George, and we were a diner.
So crazy.
We were a diner. Yep. And to me, because I grew up in South Carolina, because I think some of that comfort food, listen, I'm not bragging. I was the first chef to put lobster, macaroni, and cheese. I started that.
Really? Love that.
I was the first chef to make like fancy macaroni and cheese because I was like, this is a great vehicle. It's just basically it's creamy pasta. And so we really put the flag in the ground for comfort food and made that a thing coming out of cafeteria in the late 90s.
Did you have a mentor when you were working in New York?
Yeah, Charlie Palmer was a really great mentor of mine. So I used to work with him at Oriel, the original Oriel, and then also a restaurant called the Chef's Cuisinier Club on 23rd Street.
Why did you ultimately decide to move west?
So I moved to California in 2007. I lived in New York City forever and a diehard New Yorker. I love New York and I still love New York today. I still have my 646 cell phone number. I don't want to give it up.
So funny.
Yep, I still keep it. And so I met my wife at the Sundance Film Festival in Park City, Utah. We both lived in New York at the time, and we just happened to be at the same festival. And then we started dating when we got back to New York. And then we got married, and we were expecting our first child together. And then she's from Marin County, California, where I'm actually calling you from today. It was my third attempt to move to California. I'd always wanted to live in California. It's special. The food is fantastic. The weather, the culture, the people. California is an amazing place.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So fascinating. I recently was at this Boys and Girls Club Summit in Atlanta, and Jay Shetty was speaking to the group, and he was talking a lot about inspiration. You can't just sit on your couch and expect inspiration to come to you. You got to go out there and find it. So I guess, where do you look for inspiration, or where's the last place that sparked an idea for you?
Inspiration just kind of shows up. I think you have to be curious. You always have to be curious. I love what I do for a living. I love cooking. I study it. I read cookbooks. I'm sitting at my desk, and my desk is filled with all kinds of crazy cookbooks and scientific manuals and all kinds of interesting things that I think are really, I'm looking at I'm just looking around. I have probably 12 different cookbooks on my desk right now that are just, some are random and weird, but they're always, there's bits and pieces of that's kitchen wisdom, which is I always think really fascinating when it comes to the why. There's recipes, which is always the formula. Then there's food sources of where they get things from, which is always kind of wild. What we do with our restaurants in San Francisco, we really have a vertical platform. So Miller and Lux, our steakhouse at the Chase Center, is probably our most sophisticated, most fancy restaurant that we have in our portfolio. And so we've been listed and recommended the Michelin Guide 3 years in a row now. We got named Best Steakhouse in San Francisco by San Francisco Magazine. As a matter of fact, I'm on the cover of San Francisco Magazine as the 2024 San Francisco Chef of the Year, which is kind of cool. With that, we dive deep into steak culture. And so Temple Grandin is a really dear friend of mine when it comes to raising healthy cattle. And so I've learned a lot from her. Our cattle are raised exclusively for us. You can get our steaks at two places on planet Earth, and that's Miller and Lux in San Francisco and Miller and Lux at our new outpost at the Four Seasons Hawaii in Hawaii on the Big Island. We have 6 restaurants in San Francisco and Hawaii now. I think our steak experience is exquisite and best in category and best in class. And I feel confident with that just because I know, because I've studied steak and been a fan of it my entire life. And what we do is beyond commercially competitive. It's insane. And so when you come for experience, I promise you're going to walk out and feel like you just had the best steak of your life.
Love that. Do any of your kids have the cooking bug or no?
I have 3 amazing children. My oldest is an engineer with Google. She's very much in the tech space here in San Francisco. I have 2 boys and a girl. So my middle child is 17 years old. years old. He's kind of a budding writer. He's a very, very interesting guy. Like he's got a crazy high IQ. He's actually at a writers conference in Hawaii for the summer, like a teenage summer camp, which is cool. And he loves cars. He loves automobiles. I think he wants to be an automotive engineer, which is kind of wild. And then our baby girl, Dorothy, she's going to be 16 in August. And she is a member of a competitive dance team. And she's really into like hip hop and ballet and theatrical and all kinds of fun stuff like that. And she just got her first summer job this summer. So she's teaching younger kids dance. So they all kind of have their own little path in life, which is kind of wild. They're great diners and restaurants. They order from adult menus. They know how to order. They love truffles. They love sushi, that kind of thing. The jury's out if they're going to kind of follow my footsteps and get into the restaurant business. There's definitely easier ways to make money. That's for sure. That's for sure. But if they do, that'd be great. But if not, that's okay too.
It's interesting. You mentioned Wolfgang Puck earlier. I thought it was interesting. We had him on the podcast a few seasons ago, and he talked about how he learns from his kids and in this digital like content creator world. Do you find your kids teach you or open your eyes to new things? And if so, can you share an example of that?
Not necessarily about like kind of what I do for a living, but I think about life in general, for sure. My children are big music fans, and they're always turning me on to new musical artists, like in the hip hop space or like the rock and roll space or whatever it is that I probably wouldn't come across, especially my middle son, Hayden. He has such great musical taste. So I think in that way, I'm always kind of learning something new, just kind of stay in touch with Gen Z. The Gen Z is going to be a very, very interesting generation for sure.
I also couldn't help but notice part of your bio that actually left out of your intro. It says, I'm quoting, his insatiable quest for what's current and interesting in the food and lifestyle space has always positioned him at the forefront of new trends. And I find this interesting because I bring you up in conversation often. A lot of the things I hear about and have heard about that you've done seem to be a little bit ahead of the curve. Correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't you one of the first people to shoot a whole cookbook like with your iPad camera or something along those lines?
Yeah, we sure did. I mean, everything that we kind of worked on, sometimes we have to wait for the technology to catch up with the idea. I've been a tech entrepreneur. I've started like tech companies. I've launched 20 products and taken them to market. I launched a baby food company and sold that a couple of years ago, which is really interesting. You know, like I've written 17 cookbooks. I just founded a barbecue festival, which is kind of amazing that we shot a pilot for with Food Network. We try to take our ideas and filter them for sure, so we're not bogging ourselves down with busy work. But if we come up with a really, really good idea, we kind of go through a discipline of writing a one sheet about the idea. So if we have an idea, let's explain it at least to ourselves. Let's write it all out. Let's make sure we're thinking through how it makes money. How is it interesting? How are we helping people with that idea? And then we'll name it. And then with that name, we'll secure all social handles. And then we'll file a trademark registration for that name. And then we'll just file it. And so that way, if it ever comes up in conversation, and it always does, and that's the wild thing about being creative, is that if you can harvest your creativity, you have a file at your fingertips off the top of your head. That if you're in a business conversation and someone's saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if we had an idea for this? And you're like, you know what? I've got one. And here it is. And here's the one sheet. And here's the deck. And here's how you're going to make money. And I'm going to make money. And so we've always been very business savvy and business conscious. Being self-employed, it's like that tiger in the tall grass mentality. You're always out on the hunt, right? I've been self-employed for 30 something years now. And so we're always actively getting into new opportunities. We're always pitching new opportunities. We're always getting pitched new opportunities. Having these things mold themselves together into a career, it definitely takes some focus. It takes some collaborative efforts for sure. I think it's one of my strong suits. I work great with so many different people. 28 years on Food Network. I've worked with different production companies and different showrunners and different presidents of the network and different programming executives over the years. People had different agendas and wanted different things and wanted to take the network in a new direction, and always just been available for that. So you have to ride through a lot of things. You never want to be like hard and fixed. You want to flow like water, as Bruce Lee once said, right? You always want to flow like water, right? You want to be creative. You want to be available. You want to be flexible. You want to have a sense of gratitude always. I had this moment with Marcus Samuelson at the Aspen Food and Wine Classic 2 weeks ago. And we were standing on the top of the mountain, and every year they always take a class picture of the chefs. And we just kind of touch each other's arm because he and I are about the same age. He might be a little bit older than me, but we're about the same age. And we've been doing this together for as long as we can remember. We're just so lucky and so grateful that the food world has been so good to us. You can't be lazy ever. You have to bring a level of excellence every single day. And we try to do that. When you kind of hit that good spot where you got it, you can easily create great stuff. And that's kind of where we are now. And I'm 53 years old, so I've been doing this forever. We've never been more on top of who we are as a company, more creative, more hardworking. I've got an amazing team of people. I have hundreds of employees, and all of them are what we have the same blood type, that B positive blood type. right? And we just love hospitality. We just love it in all forms and factors. We love showing people a good time. We love cooking, preparing great food. And that's what it takes to be a success in the food space and in the hospitality space. And then with that, fame always comes. And then the money comes too.
Yeah, I love it. When did you realize that you've got it?
Gosh, when did it's gone through a couple different plateaus of success, right? Because like you're always probably a little ahead of your skis. Your ambition is really high, but then when you start out in the industry, your ability is low. Right. And so as long as you have a real high focus and high taste level where your ability needs to be, and then every single day, you have to make sure that you're up in your game. You're leveling up every single day. And eventually, once you think you're kind of parallel with your ability and your ambition at the same time, and you'll just know it. When you pitch somebody an idea and they love it and you get in a contract in 3-4 weeks, and that starts to flow a level of money that you've never really had before. And then with that success, the phone rings again. And then somebody says, oh, I like what you did over here. Can you guys do that? You'll know when it happens. When you get one, you get 10. But you can never take that for granted. I always keep our pipeline packed with projects because some things just sunset, just quietly shut down for whatever reason, right? But we love what I do. We love our partners. And it's just always wonderful to be inventive and try to have your toe into the next great thing in the food space.
You mentioned part of your process with the one cheater and on and on. Would you say you jump into something quick, like a fail fast type thing? Or do you kind of really analyze and take your time with it, or maybe a combo?
Well, failing fast, there's a strategy behind that, but you can't get into business just to fail. That may happen, and you have to have the ability to pivot if you need to. But no, we don't casually get into business with anybody, ever. So when we have a successful launch, I promise you that project has been in the pipeline for at least 2 years. Right. So there's a level of discipline and stick-to-itiveness that comes along with closing a deal, finding a partner in the first place, right? And kind of knowing where you want to be. Don't accept how people want to position you. You have to position yourself, because then you'll always be true to who you are, and your truest self will shine. If you position yourself in the marketplace of how you want to be seen versus how people want to see you sometimes, or how they think their product will shine through you, through their eyes, you can always collaborate with people and share that space for sure. But it's got to be sort of a mutual decision. It can't be 100% them or 100% you, right? You kind of define yourself in the marketplace where you want to be, and then you find a partner, and then you put a compelling, commercially competitive pitch together that's generally a deck that this is how I see this. It needs to look professional. You need to know what a professional deck looks like. I need to get into this kind of back and forth thing that could take months. And sometimes young entrepreneurs get burnt out just because legal fees are so expensive. I spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just on lawyers' fees, just negotiating contracts. And so you have to be able to have enough foresight that you can close a deal quickly just to keep those expenses down. Then once you get into a contract, like right now, when we'll get into a new restaurant opportunity, we have a template drawn up, right? So we get to the meat of it pretty quickly. We have a kind of understanding of how our business model works. We've proven we're 6 for 6 right now, we've proven that we can be really successful in the restaurant space with a very kind of defined position. And so find people that see that as an opportunity that they want to share as well. Then you get into contracts, and then that's where the hard work starts. Right. So once you get a contract closed for a restaurant or a product, and then you have to get into the R&D and development. When a product just pops up, like, hey, when you read a press release for a new restaurant launch, we've been working on that for 2.5 years. So you really have to kind of dig deep with a lot of these long-term vision with these opportunities. So we don't casually get into business with people, but when we do, we're partners for life. Right? I keep associates for decades. We keep partnerships for a long time too, because we always make money for our partners. And I love being in business for myself. I think we're pretty savvy and pretty good at it. And it's also one of those fun things I like to coach young chefs on too, about how to be in business, because it's really tribal knowledge. Even if you go to college and study business, you're not prepared, because the world will eat you up. And I've been chewed up a couple of times, right? But once you get good at it, and it takes a while to get into the rhythm with it, where you kind of sit across the table with somebody has way more money than you and way more powerful than you, and can make or break your career, and you can talk them into something, right? With the powerful, positive suggestions, you can talk them into a good idea. And when you get to that place, then you know you've made it.
Yeah, love that. Hey everyone, there's more of our conversation with Chef Tyler Florence just after we make a quick pit stop at the bar. We're doing something fun this season with our friends at Ford's Gin. The Ford's Gin brand advocacy team are creating custom recipes based on the episode you're listening to right now. Today, we're going to hear from Joe Brook, Trade Advocacy Manager for Ford's Gin in Los Angeles. He created a martini inspired by Tyler Florence and his new book, American Grill. Joe, what do you have for us?
I got to tell you, I love a steakhouse martini. So as soon as you had approached me about this, I knew exactly what I wanted. We have this one drink that was born of a proper steakhouse martini. It's called the Officers Martini. We had an Officers Reserve Navy Strength gin that we finished in sherry barrels because gin and sherry go together super duper well. And all those sherry flavors are meant to be paired with food. So this martini, it's a classic dry gin martini. The cocktail recipe is 3 parts Ford's gin, half a part of dry vermouth, and about a quarter part of fino sherry, the driest sherry you can possibly find. Nutty, savory, delightful. You stir all that together till it's nice and cold over ice. Strain it into a chilled martini glass. I'm going to say martini glass, and most places do coupes, but if it's a steakhouse, it needs to be a martini glass. And then you garnish it with a nice zest of orange, which pairs with all those flavors, and you serve it with a small ramekin of smoked almonds, salted almonds. I mean, that to me just hits all of the points of a proper steakhouse tipple.
To get the recipe for this cocktail, check out the episode notes in your podcast player. To learn more about Ford's Gin, go to fordsgin.com and follow them on social media at Ford's Gin. Please drink responsibly. Ford's London Dry Gin, 45% ABV, Brown-Forman, Louisville, Kentucky. Ford's Gin is a registered trademark. Ford's Gin. Shake up the journey. Let's talk about Miller Lux some more. Crushing it. 3 locations now?
2, and we have 2 more in the pipeline. Yeah,
I love it. Why does Miller Lux excite you? I would love to hear more on that.
Miller Lux is a very, very special name first and foremost, right? So the name is real. It's a real story about 2 immigrants that came to America during the pioneer years of the Wild Wild West. And so Henry Miller and Charles Lux were both immigrants from Germany, and they were both butchers by trade. And they came to San Francisco during the gold rush era because that's where the new economy was in America. And they just wanted to make their fame and fortune on the West Coast. And so where the Chase Center sits right now, this is how I discovered the name in the first place. But where the Chase Center sits right now, going back from 1860 all the way to the 1906 earthquake, it used to be the largest meat packing district on the West Coast of the United States, and it was called Butcherstown. And Miller & Lux was the largest company inside Butcherstown. And these 2 guys had this illustrious 60-year career, and not only in like the cattle butchery trade, but also in land management and cattle ranching. So they had gotten into just like buying up cattle ranching. So they had one contiguous piece of property from San Francisco all the way down to Bakersfield, one uncut piece of ranching property that extended the majority of the state of California. They also had ranches in Oregon, and they also had ranches in Washington State, and they were known as the Cattle Kings of California. And so when I found this name, and I found it in a book, I'm like, oh my God, what a real story. And it also sounds like an amazing name for a restaurant. Kind of sounds like Smith & Walensky a little bit, right? And so I'm like, God, wouldn't this be great? So I called my trademark attorney in New York, and I'm like, just do me a favor, just look up this name. It's got to be protected. There's got to be a trademark on it. He called me back a couple of days later. He goes, you're not going to believe this, because he did a deep dive on it. He said the brand was abandoned in 1925.
You're like, get it.
Exactly. I just re-registered the trademark, and then I filed 9 other trademarks around that to like circle the wagons on it. And now we get a chance to tell their story.
That's really cool.
Which is amazing. So this is a real ranching company, a real ranching outfit that had like real brands they branded cattle with, right? And then they had an enormous amount of economy. And also the really interesting like connections with Miller & Lux and Miller & Lux in Hawaii. Miller & Lux shipped cattle to the Big Island in Hawaii.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, like the thread through of how, and they shipped cattle all over the world. They shipped beef all over the world. And they fed a lot of the pioneers that went on to make a fortune in the gold rush era, which is kind of wild. I love the brand. I love the name. It's so real. It's a real name. It was real people, right? And so we get a chance to tell their story again. And we've been able to celebrate the heritage of Miller & Lux. We've had Miller & Lux dinners with extended members of the family where people, would come in for dinner like that was my great uncle, or, it was my great grandfather, and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So, and we just get a chance to tell their story again, which is amazing. And there's been books written about them. This was written in 1934. Okay. It's called The Cattle King of California. And this is about Henry Miller.
Wow.
Right? He's one of the 2, this is an old book.
Where'd you find that?
I got connections, man. We start digging for fun stuff like that. I think my wife got that on eBay and gave it to me for Christmas last year. But it's a very special book. So we get a chance to tell their story. We consider them our founders. We have portraits of them in our foyer of a restaurant. Then on top of that, I love the steak experience. I love the steakhouse genre. We developed not only a delicious Caesar salad, but it's a 7-step ceremony that gets made right in front of you, tableside. And Forbes magazine said it was the best Caesar salad in America. I happen to agree with them, but it's nice when you get some confirmation like that. Our wine program is spectacular. Just like big baller California cabs and great DRCs from France and great Brunel de Montalcinos and great Nebbiolos and great wines from around the world and delicious Riojas. We're a big red restaurant. That and our 45-day dry age, our shellfish program is spectacular. I developed the estuary in my kitchen, and it's kind of like a modified fish tank, but it's a little more high tech than that. The oysters, which are all West Coast oysters, which I think are some of the best in the country, they're in this estuary tank where the water is salinated and then pH balanced to the ocean. The oysters get rained on all day, all night, and so they think they're still in an estuary. The oysters are healthy and they're fresh. When you crack it open, either the oysters are plump and insanely delicious. So we have, I think, some of the best oysters, and definitely in San Francisco for sure. We just love like taking that steakhouse genre and then really just imagining the whole thing at a completely different atmosphere. The restaurant's beautiful. The food is great. The service is spectacular. And so we just try to live that life every day.
Do you recreate that estuary at the Hawaii property?
We're about to. Yeah. So the Hawaii property was built in 1997. So that's 28 years old. It used to be Alan Wong's restaurant. He's a big chef from Oahu. And so we're going through a $900,000 kitchen renovation coming up in January. So we're going to rebuild that there for sure. For sure. Also, we're going to have dry aging cabinetry and all kinds of fun stuff. It's going to be great.
Super cool. I love that. I'll have to check that out. I wish I could say next time I'm in Hawaii, but likely San Francisco before that. We'll see.
Well, I'd love to have you, man. And everybody that's listening, like Hawaii is such a special place for us. And we're so grateful for that opportunity. And the folks at the Four Seasons have been wonderful. And the restaurant's fun and people love it. And then I get to go to Hawaii 7 times a year.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going there in 2 weeks, and I'll be there for 10 days. Yeah,
so
it's great.
I want to cruise back quick to the early Food Network days. How did that originally happen?
Gosh, so I was 25 years old and I was the executive chef of a restaurant called Cibo, C-I-B-O, Cibo. And it was on 42nd Street and 2nd in Tudor City, just on the cusp of Tudor City. We were getting a lot of buzz. It was contemporary Italian, but Lydia Bastianich, she was just sort of my mentor. I was reading all of her books and going to Felidia as much as I possibly can and really just sort of, as much as any like kid from South Carolina could study Italian culture in New York City, right? Just trying to like fast track, pick it up because I just loved Italian food so much. And so we were getting a lot of buzz. And then a woman named Lori Green, I'll never forget her, walked into the restaurant and she was an executive of Food Network. And I always say like chef's coats are double-breasted for a reason, right? So you get the dirty side, and you flip it over to the clean side. And then you walk out in the dining room with a big stack of business cards and you start shaking your hand and just start working the room, right? And saying hello to everybody.
Who taught you that?
I've always been a people person. I love people. I'm not afraid of anybody. I'm not afraid to talk to anybody. And it's because everybody's a human being, right? And so just kind of walk out and say hi. And she goes, that food was really amazing. Everyone's talking about you in New York City. And, we have Food Network. I don't know if you've heard about it. And it was kind of a big deal in New York and Chicago and Los Angeles at the time. And so I did one appearance in 1996 that changed my life forever, and they invited me back. And so I got my first show in 99, but between 1996 and 99, I probably did 300 guest appearances. I was on all the time. They were just building up some sort of like FaceTime and face recognition time. And then we launched Food 911 in 1999. And then that sort of ushered in, which is a show because if you dial 911, the police show up. But if you burn your tuna noodle casserole and dial Food 911, I show up. And it really kind of ushered in a cooking show style called Rescue Me. And so after Food 911, there was a bunch of like Rescue Me shows. And so we did that for 6.5 years. We did about 90 episodes a year for almost 7 years and just loved it. We were Emeril Lagasse's lead-in for 5 years, right before Emeril Live. I just loved it. I mean, it completely changed my life. I went from making like a decent living as an executive chef of a restaurant in New York City to making a lot of money in television. Then the fame and the cookbooks and, the touring and the facial recognition and the notoriety that kind of comes along with that. It's just been something that's just been, I'm so incredibly grateful for it. I'm grateful for it today. Fame is never anything you take lightly. It's never going to last forever. And I think it's really important that you have a healthy business balance that when it does wrap up, because it always will, that you're just not left out in the cold going, what happened to me? So it's the reason that, and I love Food Network, it's a really good spoke in my wheel, but then we're so deep in so many different other things between real estate and restaurants and products and that kind of stuff. It's nice to have the balance, but being famous is, if you can get there and you can get it, because it's actually kind of easy to get on television these days in the food space. But once you get it, you have to sustain it and maintain it, right? It's easy to get on television, but to have that deep product knowledge that you could cook for 5 seasons, 10 seasons, whatever it is, right? And not repeat yourself and create recipe content that's epic for the ages. That's the kind of like awareness that you need to be prepared for if those opportunities happen. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity. And it feels like I'll be working with Food Network forever. You know, it's like season 17 of the Great Food Truck Race. We've been shooting that show for 15 years. Season 17 drops but on June 30th. It's crazier than ever. And we just shot a new pilot for a new television show called Masters of Fire, which is a live fire barbecue competition thing, which is going to be cool too. That's coming out next year. And listen, I love what I do for a living. And it shows, right? So I think that first question is like, what's the secret sauce? Is authenticity. Right? Like you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. You have to know what you're talking about, right? You have to be pleasant and you have to be friendly, right? And you have to smile and you have to listen, where I'm a great listener. And so these things, these like really good attributes of being a successful person starts with a personality check, right? Do you have the personality and bandwidth to be successful in business? And that's learning as much as you can. Never, ever, ever stop learning and suck up as much as you possibly can from anybody. I learned stuff from dishwashers. I learned like how to be efficient from like everybody in my company all the time. And with that level of gratitude that kind of comes along with it from a customer standpoint, like I still work the line. I still do Dover sauce tableside. I touch tables when I go to my restaurants. Like I'm a working chef. And so with that, like that's who I am as a person. And that equals longevity.
I love that. And so you mentioned your cookbook. I want to throw that into the mix. You recently released your 17th cookbook, American Grill. Why that book now?
Well, so we had the opportunity for the book, right? And then writing 17 cookbooks, you get into a rhythm of like your cookbook writing style. I wrote 3 as a parent, a father, and a family man, right? So it's always been like family-oriented cooking. I wrote 3 children's books called Tyler Makes. They're designed for like early readers, kindergartners, and first graders. I wrote a baby food book because I started a baby food company. I've done bookazines, a whole series of that before. I've written bestsellers that match television shows I've had on in the past. And so it's always really been about great food that you can make for your family and friends this weekend. It's always been kind of like my rhythm. And then you hit this pivot, right? And so I gave a keynote address at a public relations and travel and tourism conference a couple of weeks ago. And I boiled it down to the metaphor of a comet, right? So you see the comet and then you see the comet tail. And then my question is like, when you see a comet in the sky, do you see the comet or do you see the tail is what lights up the sky? The comet was me deciding I wanted to open up a steakhouse in 2019. That was the comet. Diving deep into who I am as a person, what I'm really passionate about, how I want to be seen, what kind of food I want to cook, what's my next big cultural statement, my love of beef, my love of family ranching and those stories and celebrating that culture. That was the comet. The comet tail has been everything that's come after that decision. So then the cookbook happened, right? And so we wanted to like build a cookbook that was all about grilling, which is really how I like to cook. Like just outside my kitchen, I have 8 grills set up, locked and loaded.
How do you decide which one you're using?
They all do something a little different. I mean, I have stick smokers. I have big green eggs. I have wood burning ovens. I have like a big fancy gas grill. My wife likes that one a lot. So you hit a button and the flame comes on. To me, charcoal on beef tastes like summertime, right? I just love grilled, roasted, charred, live fire cooking. And so we decided to go deep in that particular position, kind of create like a whole storyline out of it. And then once we decided that, it just flowed. 125 recipes celebrating live fires. And it was the number 1 book on launch day. It was the number 1 book in the barbecue and grill category. It was number 1 new release on Amazon. And so we have a certified Amazon bestseller. And I think it's my best work. I think it's one of those books that's going to live forever. American Grill will be your barbecue Bible they'll be using for years and years to come. But it's all part of the comet tail, right? And so with that, we developed the book, turned into the opportunity for a book tour, and the opportunity for a book tour turned into a barbecue festival, and the barbecue festival turned into a pilot for a television show, and so and on and on and on. And so Masters of Fire was born out of the creative need to do something cool with the idea of doing a book tour. Masters of Fire will be the premier barbecue live fire festival in America. It's coming. It's already a fucking thing.
It looks so good.
Thing.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. If you guys like follow me on Instagram and go into like the highlight bubbles, right? And so you just click the Masters of Fire bubble and see how much fun we have. So we just had our second festival. The first one was in Paso Robles about a month ago. And we just had our second festival last weekend in Napa. And 5 of the area's best chefs. And it's like barbecue pit bosses versus Michelin star chefs. You're going head to head. And barbecue, quote unquote, like low and slow, like beef ribs and briskets and sausage and pork ribs. That kind of like what you think. It's just one of the disciplines. It's like Texas meets like Argentinian asado style cooking, where you're cooking over like different surfaces and either top down cooking or bottom up cooking or charcoal and different woods, and it's so fascinating. High hanging roasting, and all the chefs bring their own crazy rigs. I didn't have to explain this to anybody. I started a festival. I'm like, chefs, I'm coming to your town. It's a fun festival. The chefs compete for a $5,000 cash prize. So we have 7 of these festivals kind of lined up this summer. And then the finale, our nationals, we're calling it, is going to be on the Dallas Cowboys football field in October. We have Paso Robles, Napa, Nashville, St. Louis, San Diego coming up. Denver's coming up in 30 days. And Charleston's coming up in September too. And so we have all these like Masters of Fire festival competitions coming up, and we're taking the winners. And then we're going to have a national competition on the Dallas Cowboys football field in October, which will be fun. And Food Network loved the idea. And so we shot a pilot for it. The show is so much fun. And it's food that you've never seen before. It's like super high-tech, cool cooking. It's like low and slow and hot and fast and delicious creativity. Once you got a pipe into this thing, which is kind of wild too, because like live fire cooking and grilling and barbecuing is a religion. Like NFL or PGA or Formula One or NASCAR, people love to cook out and grill. And so this will be their siren song. This will be their championship show that they'll watch on television. This will feel like barbecue sport. The show is so much fun.
So part of the podcast, we celebrate chefs are extremely generous and they all give back to the community. As you know, learning how they do it is what I hope to highlight, and it inspires us to keep going. So I would love for you to share some of the work you have done or do in the community. I know you've been active with After School Alliance and you did the movie on the California wildfire. So I'm just going to throw that all in the hopper and let you dive in.
I think if you're going to be a chef, I think you have to be civic minded because you have a public position, right? Like I am a chef and I'm asking people to come to my restaurant to spend money in my place, right? There's generally a social trade-off, right? Our clients that come into the restaurant, not all of them, but a few of them have their own opportunities for social give back that they're working on too. And they would like for you to be a part of it. And we always say yes. So we're on a level that we donate dinners and that kind of stuff to raise money for all kinds of social events in San Francisco. We're always there for that, like Meals on Wheels and the Marin San Francisco Marin Food Bank. And we do lots of charity events. Then there's things that I'm personally passionate about. And like, I really like to work with the USO. I think the USO is an amazing organization and we do lots of deployments with them as well. I've been to Japan. We've worked with military bases all over the country, and the USO really celebrates the active soldiers that are, the backbone of our active military, and to kind of show them a good time. It also celebrates the families because everybody makes sacrifices with our service members. And so we're very, very active with that. We're also a point person with World Central Kitchen with Jose Andres. And so anything that kind of happens from a tragedy standpoint, and Northern California's kind of been one of those fire belts. Knock on wood, we haven't had one in a couple of years. But if something goes down in Northern California and World Central Kitchen activates, they'll fly from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco. They'll come to my house, and then we'll plan our deployment for my dining room table, and then we'll launch it. And so we've done, a handful of deployments with them as well. I think it's really important. Like, we're very active in politics in San Francisco. You have to be, right? And so because everybody wants to hear what you think about it. And with that, I don't run my mouth. I don't wear my political heart on my sleeve. I love everybody. I don't care where you get your news from. Everybody likes steak. For the most part, I'm neutral. I'm not going to get involved in politics per se, but I do get involved in things that we can help heal people, if we can help feed people. Like, that's just part of the generosity, right? And so that's who we are from a political position, from a social well-being position. We just want to make sure that we're not leaving anybody out of the conversation. Everybody's entitled to a hot plate of food every day. Everybody. It's the human dignity side of it. And that's what we want to make sure. Like, I was a board member of the San Francisco Marin Food Bank for a decade. We started a big fundraising program with them called One Big Table that raises about $1 million a year. That feeds a lot of people in the Bay Area. And I've been to many drop-offs and stood in line with folks. And it's wild too, because I'm a successful chef and I write cookbooks and I have fancy restaurants that have like truffles and stuff, right? Then on the other side of it, if you go stand in line with people who are hanging in that borderline unhoused territory, right? And then so they need a food bank to make ends meet on a regular basis. And if you stand there and you pass out food and so somebody walks up to you and you put like 3 pounds of potatoes and 2 pounds of carrots and a head of cabbage and a half dozen eggs into a bag, and that's going to be probably their food for the majority of the week. That's a very humbling, real experience that I think it's crucial that we start to try to find solutions for that. I mean, we're the richest country in the world. We shouldn't have homelessness at the level that we have it. We try to do our small step. We just want to be one of those shining moments that's just trying to do something. We're just trying to be a little better than we were yesterday, trying to help a few more people than we did today. How can we leave the world a better place we found it?
Yeah, love it. I want to do a super quick speed round and then close it out with one question and be done. Number one, what did you have for dinner last night?
Last night we had this wonderful dinner party at our house. I threw this really fun dinner party. Last night I had West Home red Wagyu filet mignon with truffled corn pudding for dinner. The appetizer was like this really kind of beautiful mini lasagna Provençal with summer squash and crookneck squash and zucchini from my garden.
Love it. Name a smell in the kitchen you love.
Gosh, coffee.
Name a smell in the kitchen you hate.
Burnt garlic.
What pisses you off in the kitchen?
Inattention to detail.
And what makes you happy in the kitchen?
Attention to detail.
Do you have a favorite late night snack?
I try not to eat late. What's my favorite late night snack? Probably like what's in a deli container, standing over the sink. Because sometimes I get home from the restaurant like 9 o'clock and my wife's like, the kids are upstairs and I'll just like quietly kind of like whatever, honestly, it's probably whatever they have for dinner. My wife's a great cook too. So that she'll like leave me like a little small plate. I'll pop in the microwave and it's not as glamorous as everybody thinks, but it's like probably what my wife had for dinner.
Love it.
It's my favorite late snack.
I have a bunch of closing questions, but I'm really inspired by your like energy and enthusiasm and hearing you speak, looking at your Instagram. You mentioned at 53 years old. How do you keep this up? Like, where do you get this enthusiasm from?
I love it. And that's real. And we're really good at it. And that's what I'm so proud of, right? Because you work your whole life. It's that ambition versus ability kind of thing we're talking about earlier, right? Like my ambition and my ability are in lockstep right now. And so we dream it up. We knock it out of the park. We're great storytellers. We're great designers. We're great business partners. We're great business operators. I love financial forensics. I love diving into P&Ls and trying to figure out how to like tighten everything up if we have to, right? And I love creating new products, right? It's great. Like our big push this week, we're launching these what we call boozy coffee at Miller Lux Provisions, our 2 cafes in Union Square. So we're launching coffee drinks this week, which is kind of cool. And so we did a bunch of like awesome R&D with that, and they are so fun. They're so fun.
What coffee do you use at the restaurant? I feel like you go deep on everything, and it must be good coffee.
Yeah, oh my God. It's a company called Postscript. They're in Jackson Square in San Francisco. The coffee is roasted in San Francisco. And it's a Jakarta blend. It's a medium roast. And it has this like really spectacular kind of like dried blueberry balm in the middle. Great crema, really nice oils to come out of it, low acid. And so we'll take that and make a cold brew out of it, which takes a full 24 hours. And we add an ad shot to that. And then we'll batch the boozy part of it at the restaurant and then take it over to our coffee cafe. So our folks who are just making coffee can just go 1, 2, 3 and it's done. So we're launching those this week. And that was really kind of a fun program because we just wanted to just do something new. And we think that because we have a liquor license there. And so we thought that like putting together a spectacular like boozy coffee drinks feels like a fun thing to go shop and let's go have a drink. Everybody loves an espresso martini, so I think these are going to be fun too.
Yeah, awesome. Dude, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you got a lot on your plate, but this was a masterclass beyond the kitchen into the business world. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for chatting with us. I'm excited to come visit all of the newest, latest, greatest, and not newest projects that you have going on.
My pleasure, Andrew. Listen, it's so great to talk to you. And I think inside the business world, you have to understand business acumen more than you think you know it now, because you don't know enough, right? And so that's part of like that ongoing study of just like getting better all the time. And you have to know if your product is commercially competitive, right? You have to know that. And your mission in life is just to be a little better tomorrow than you were today.
That's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks again to Chef Tyler Florence. Find him on Instagram at Tyler Florence. To learn more about San Francisco Marin Food Bank, go to sfmfoodbank.org. To learn more about the USO, go to uso.org. And to learn more about World Central Kitchen, go to wck.org. We'll share links in the episode notes and at beyondtheplatepodcast.com. This episode was produced by myself, along with Ian Cohen, Joel Yetton, and Sean Petrosian. Our digital media producer is Sarah McClellan-Mee. Our music has been composed by Goldford. Find him at iGoldford. As always, special shout out to my wife, Katie. If you have not started following me yet, you should. Find me across all social media at On Cappy's Plate, or go to beyondtheplatepodcast.com and keep up to date with Beyond the Plate. Beyond the Plate is also on social at BT Plate Podcast. If you have a moment, we'd be grateful of your support by rating, reviewing, and even hitting that subscribe button to the podcast. Don't forget to join us next Wednesday for an episode of Beyond the Drink, our companion podcast of Beyond the Plate, brought to you by our friends at Ford's Gin. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Plate. I'm Cappy, and remember, there are never too many cooks in the kitchen.